Hi friends, this is LeanReads, where big ideas meet practical takeaways, all distilled from great books. Grief is one of the hardest experiences we'll ever face. Yet it's also one of the least understood. In today's video, we'll explore Megan Devine's book It's Okay That You're Not Okay, a powerful guide that redefines how we think about loss and how we support those who are grieving. Want to explore more? Check out the link to the book down in the description. Alright, let's begin. It Is Okay That You're Not Okay 2017 is a profound exploration of grief and loss, challenging the cultural myths that tell us suffering should be fixed or neatly resolved with time. Instead of treating grief as a problem to solve, Megan Devine invites us to honor it as a natural part of love and life. This book is both a compassionate companion for those who are grieving and a practical guide for those who wish to support them. Megan Devine is a psychotherapist, writer, and grief advocate whose work reshapes how the world understands loss. Through her website, public talks, and groundbreaking courses such as Writing Your Grief, she has built communities where grieving people can find validation, support, and solidarity. Her voice is both honest and radical. Instead of pushing toxic positivity, she validates the real pain of grief and teaches us how to live alongside it. How many times have you heard someone say, "Everything happens for a reason, you'll feel better soon"? If you've ever wanted to scream when someone offered these words after your loved one died, you're not alone. These common phrases, while well-intentioned, often dismiss the depth of grief and leave people feeling more isolated. Megan Devine flips this harmful narrative. She reminds us that grief is not an illness to cure or a weakness to overcome. It's the natural counterpart of love. Grief doesn't follow a schedule, and it doesn't vanish with platitudes. Instead, it demands space, honesty, and communal support. This book doesn't promise to erase the pain. Rather, it offers tools for living with loss, distinguishing between unavoidable grief and unnecessary suffering, reducing the stress of bereavement, and discovering meaning while carrying the weight of absence. Accept that grief is the natural response to great loss. If you've ever faced the devastating shock of losing someone you love, you know that no amount of comforting words can make the pain disappear. In fact, even the most well-meaning phrases can often feel hollow, dismissive, or even insulting. To begin rethinking how we support the grieving, we must first acknowledge how society consistently minimizes grief, reducing it to cliches rather than respecting it as the profound human experience it truly is. The myth of everything happens for a reason, one of the most common cultural responses to loss is the belief that everything happens for a reason, but this is not true. A healthy person can suddenly die within hours, without rhyme or reason. Another damaging idea is that death serves as some kind of moral or spiritual lesson. Telling a grieving mother that the loss of her child is meant to teach her something implies that her parenting or her life needed to be corrected. Even if unintentional, such words only deepen her wound. The truth is simple. Death happens because it is part of life, not because we need to be fixed. The burden of comparison, another well-meaning but hurtful response, is when people feel compelled to rate their own stories of loss upon hearing about yours. Perhaps a coworker, after learning about your parents' passing, tells you about the time they lost a beloved pet or went through a painful breakup. Though intended as empathy, such comparisons often miss the mark. Why? Because no two losses are alike. Losing a job is not the same as losing a limb. A breakup is not the same as death. Each loss carries its own weight and its own unique scars. The problem with stages of grief, cultural and medical models also misrepresent grief. Consider Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler's famous 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. While this framework has helped many people identify emotions, it is often misused as a strict roadmap. In reality, grief does not follow a linear order. You may plunge straight into depression, or you may wrestle with acceptance for the rest of your life, and both are entirely valid. Naming grief for what it truly is, real support begins when we stop treating grief like a disease to cure and instead call it what it is, a natural, unavoidable experience of being human. Grief is not a flaw in need of fixing. It is the price of love and something that deserves to be honored and shared, not minimized or silenced. Grieve in your own way without adding unnecessary suffering. Grief is brutal. It changes everything about your life, especially who you are. Your pain deserves to be acknowledged honestly, without being rushed or pushed aside. In fact, the earliest days of grief are often when the pressure to move on can cause the most harm. If your pain isn't given space, it can fester and explode in destructive ways. You have the right to grieve on your own terms. If you don't feel like speaking to anyone at the funeral, that's okay. You can decline conversations and delegate practical tasks until you're ready. If you're not prepared to attend memorial services organized by friends, you don't have to go. If you can't bring yourself to wake up early, go grocery shopping, or keep to a routine for weeks or even months, that's fine too. Rest. Order groceries online. Allow yourself space. There is no correct timetable for mourning. No one else gets to dictate how you grieve. The difference between pain and unnecessary suffering, as the Buddha taught, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. At first, this may sound abstract, but it holds a real truth. You cannot avoid the searing pain of loss, but you can avoid amplifying that pain by forcing yourself into actions, timelines, or expectations that don't fit you. You don't need to remove your wedding ring, clean out your child's room, or scatter a parent's ashes on anyone else's schedule. You may never do these things, and that's okay. Acting before you're ready can leave scars of regret that only deepen the wound. Don't let others define your grief. Death often brings out the worst in people, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to behave. A quiet, distant spouse may suddenly focus on funeral logistics or inheritance issues. Close friends might stop calling, unsure of what to say. Acquaintances may offer clumsy words of encouragement that feel insulting. Even spiritual communities sometimes frame grief as a test of faith you're supposed to overcome. These responses can make you angry, and you have every right to be. Nothing anyone says or does will bring your loved one back. The rage and sadness you feel are not signs of weakness, but natural responses to unbearable loss. Protect your peace. Step away when you need to. Grief doesn't have to be meaningful, at least not yet. A death doesn't have to carry a lesson, a purpose, or a silver lining, especially in the early days of loss. What matters most is that you grieve in the way that feels right for you. For as long as it takes, your life has been permanently altered, and there is no deadline for adjusting to that reality. Now that you know grief belongs to you and only you, the next step is to care for yourself fully and tenderly. In the following section, we'll explore how to manage the physical and emotional stress symptoms that grief leaves in its wake. Easing grief stress symptoms one small step at a time. Grief is overwhelming. It is one of the most intense emotional experiences a person can face. But what we often underestimate is just how much it also affects the body and mind. There will be days when the pain of loss feels unbearable. The waves of shock, the crushing fog of forgetfulness, and the exhaustion can make daily life almost impossible. That's when small, steady steps matter most. Gentle self-care practices won't erase your grief, but they can ease the unnecessary suffering that often comes with it. Observe your experience without judgment. One of the first things you can do is simply notice how grief shows up for you. Keep a small journal of what your days feel like. When do you feel a little more stable? When do you feel completely lost? This awareness can help you see what activities, people, or places give you comfort and what drains you. From there, you can make better choices about what to hold onto and what to avoid for now. This isn't about grading yourself or proving anything. It's simply an experiment in easing your own suffering. How grief affects the mind. Many grieving people wrestle with guilt about their loved one's death. Replay after replay of what ifs can loop endlessly in your mind. This is a normal reaction, especially after a sudden loss. Your brain, under immense stress, is desperately searching for answers or alternative outcomes. But while understandable, those loops rarely help you heal. Instead, you can channel the energy into writing, journaling, or even drawing ways to release the storm of thoughts without letting them consume you. Grief can also spark big, unsettling questions. What's the point of life? Wondering about life's meaning doesn't necessarily mean you want to die. It's important to know there's a difference between not wanting to live this way and actively wanting death. The antidote to these dark thoughts is connection. Confide in someone you trust. Don't carry the weight alone. You may also notice your concentration slipping, forgotten keys, unpaid bills, missed appointments. These are common in grief's fog. Don't beat yourself up. Use reminders, notes, and small systems to support your memory. If anxiety spikes, ground yourself by focusing on something simple. Count your breaths. Read the labels on nearby objects, or repeat a calming phrase. And if grief interrupts your sleep, whether with nightmares or sudden naps, remind yourself that your brain is simply trying to protect you. How grief affects the body. Grief is a full-body experience. For some, it shows up as deep fatigue. For others, it comes as headaches, heartburn, or new aches they've never had before. Some people even report experiencing physical pain that mirrors what their loved one endured before death. These sensations, while strange, are the body's stress response. Gentle movement like walking around the house or doing light stretches can help keep your energy from collapsing. Your appetite may also swing wildly. Some find themselves eating nonstop, while others can barely swallow a bite. The best you can do is nourish yourself whenever you're able, leaning toward wholesome, nutrient-dense foods when possible. Over time, your appetite will find balance again. Grief will always hurt, but it doesn't have to destroy you. By tending carefully to both your mind and body, you give yourself the best chance to endure the pain without being crushed by extra layers of suffering. You can't get over grief, but you can create new meaning around it. Time moves forward. Days become weeks, and weeks become months. At some point, the raw intensity of early grief softens just enough to let you breathe again. But that doesn't mean your grief disappears. Contrary to what society often tells us, you don't get over the death of someone you love, you learn to live with it. Anniversaries may sting even more than the first year. 10 years later, you may miss your parent more than ever. And that's okay. Grief isn't something that fades on schedule. It stays with you. The question is, how will you carry it? And how will you let it shape the meaning of your life? Reimagining recovery. When people hear the word recovery, they often imagine closure, healing, or the end of sadness. But for grieving hearts, recovery looks different. It is not about fixing what's broken. It's about finding ways to coexist with your pain. In the later phases of grief, you might notice life becoming a bit less overwhelming. But here's the paradox. You might not even want to feel better. Those first raw months, as painful as they were, may have been the moments you felt closest to the person you lost. That closeness can make letting go feel like betrayal. This is why hope is essential. Not hope that the grief will vanish, but hope that you can live fully while carrying it. Because hope is intangible, having an image or vision to hold onto can help. Ask yourself, what do I imagine my grief looking like in the future? How do I picture myself carrying it? What parts of the initial pain am I ready to release? And what parts do I want to hold onto? Reflection brings clarity, and with clarity, grief evolves into something more bearable, something with personal meaning. Honest conversations about grief. Here comes the harder part, talking openly about grief's reality. It's difficult to explain to friends and family what kind of support actually helps. Sometimes, when you tell them that their comforting words are actually painful, they might feel defensive, But you're not being negative or ungrateful, you're being honest. The silence and misunderstandings around grief only break when truth is spoken, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Through these conversations, something else happens. You discover who your real allies are. Some friends may step back, unable to handle the reality of grief. Others will lean in, listen, and walk beside you without judgment. This natural reshaping of your support system allows you to gather a team of companions who can help carry the weight with you. Grief doesn't need fixing, it needs witnessing, it needs sharing. At its core, grief is proof of love. You hurt because you loved deeply and were loved in return. With self-agency and the right support, you can honor both truths. Grief never disappears, and neither does the love that created it. Supporting someone in grief is not easy, but it is possible and deeply necessary. When we honor the true nature of grief, we stop treating it as a problem to be solved and begin to see it as an experience to be shared. Grief is not an illness. It doesn't need curing. What it needs is space, honesty, and community. The path to finding meaning is not about leaving grief behind, but learning how to live with it. Within loss, there can also be love, connection, and even purpose. To walk alongside grief is to acknowledge that your pain is real, and so is the bond that caused it. At the heart of it, every one of us deserves to grieve. We deserve to both give and receive genuine compassion. At the end of the day, we all need people to cry with us, to sit in the silence, and to keep moving forward together. That is the most natural truth of being human. Reading Megan Devine "It's Okay That You're Not Okay" was both eye-opening and deeply moving. Unlike many self-help books that focus on fixing or moving on, this book gives grief the honesty and respect it deserves. What struck me the most is how Devine validates the raw, uncomfortable truth that grief doesn't follow a neat timeline or predictable stages. Her words remind us that grief is not a flaw in the human experience, it is the human experience. If we love deeply, then loss will inevitably hurt deeply, personally. I found her approach liberating. Instead of feeling pressure to get over it or meet society's expectations, the book encourages us to accept grief as part of life and to make space for it. That doesn't mean wallowing in sadness forever, but rather learning how to live with loss in a way that honors our loved ones and our own humanity. Another part that resonated with me was her discussion on how poorly equipped our culture is to support people who are grieving. Simple, misguided phrases like "everything happens for a reason" often do more harm than good. Devine pushes us to rethink how we show up for others, not by offering quick fixes, but by offering presence, patience, and compassion. By the time I finished the book, I realized it isn't just a guide for the grieving. It is also a manifesto for building a more empathetic world, one where we can sit with each other's pain without rushing to erase it. For me, "It's Okay That You're Not Okay" was not just about grief, but about love, humanity, and connection. It reminded me that grief is not the end of meaning, but often the beginning of a new way to understand it. If this book touched you the way it touched me, I encourage you to read it in full. It doesn't offer quick fixes, but it does offer honesty, compassion, and real tools to live with grief. The link is in the description if you'd like to get your own copy. And if you found this review meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more thoughtful book discussions.